Hi, I'm Astrid. And no, I didn't drop out of school to follow a boyfriend across Europe. That's just what my mother told the neighbors. What really happened? I worked nights, ate instant noodles behind restaurant dumpsters, passed out on shift. No one came. Meanwhile, my sister? She was clinking champagne glasses in LA, on my money. At Christmas, Dad asked if the $1,500 a month was helping. I said, "What money?" The next morning, 83 missed calls. Turns out, Mom rerouted every cent of my trust fund to support my sister's dream. Now tell me, how do you survive being erased by the people who raised you? It was 11:45 on a Tuesday night, and the buzzing fluorescent lights in the back of the diner felt sharper than usual. I'd been on my feet for nearly 14 hours straight, 2 double shifts back to back, and the silence behind the storage shelves was the only thing keeping me from unraveling. I crouched down between boxes of canned chili and overstocked ketchup, tearing open a cup of instant noodles. No microwave. I poured lukewarm tap water from the break room faucet and waited. 5 minutes, maybe 6. It didn't matter. Half cooked was still better than nothing. Steam barely rose from the cup as I shoveled it in, each bite more about motion than taste. My legs ached. My fingers were raw from wiping down tables. My shoes, worn out and split at the soles, let in cold from the kitchen floor. Nobody noticed I was gone. Nobody ever really noticed when I was there. "Table 6 needs a refill," my coworker called out. I stood too fast. The next thing I remember was the sharp clang of the metal tray hitting tile, and then darkness. When I came to, the world was washed in pale hospital lights, the beep of machines, the scratchy fabric of a hospital gown, an IV in my arm. My mouth was dry, throat sore, and everything about the room felt temporary, as if I had been dropped into someone else's problem. A nurse leaned over me. "Do you have someone we can call?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I blinked. Then finally, no. Not because I didn't have a family, but because they wouldn't come. When the nurse left, I reached for my phone. 1% battery. I tapped in my passcode. No missed calls. No messages. I opened my texts anyway, just in case something had come through that hadn't notified. Nothing. Then, a ping. A text from Mom. "Glad you're doing okay? Could you send the name of that skincare line you liked? Celine wants to try it." A second one followed almost instantly. "Don't forget to eat." I stared at the screen. The silence in my chest was louder than any heart monitor. Not pain, not anger, just an emptiness I'd grown familiar with, a vacuum where comfort used to live. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was no question in her text, just a performance of care, sent from God knows where. Probably a spa, maybe even mid-massage. The last time I spoke to her, really spoke, was 2 months ago. I'd asked about help with tuition. Nothing big, just enough to get me through the last part of the semester. "You're an adult now," she'd said. "You're supposed to manage." Manage. Like managing meant eating dry cereal for dinner, or doing laundry at 2 a.m. at the cheapest laundromat in the city, or working back-to-back shifts while studying for physiology exams because rent didn't pay itself. The nurse returned, handed me a hospital-issue charger. I thanked her, plugged in my phone, let it boot. Out of habit, I opened Instagram. The first story that loaded, Celine, smiling into the camera, jazz music in the background. She was sipping something golden, sparkling. The location tagged, West Hollywood Rooftop Brunch. Her caption read, "No better way to start the day. Thanks, Mom, for always supporting the dream." A cream Dior dress hugged her frame. Her nails were freshly manicured. Her hair, blown out and glossy, bounced as she laughed into the camera. I looked down at my taped wrist. The IV tugged a little as I shifted. Still no tears. I tapped the 3 dots on the post. Saved. Not because I wanted to keep it, because I needed to remember. 2 days later, I stood in front of my mini fridge with the door open, letting the dim light spill out onto the tile floor. Inside, a shriveled half-lemon, an expired container of Greek yogurt, and one sad bottle of mustard. That was it. The cold didn't bother me. The emptiness did. The radiator in the corner clanged like it was choking on air, and the window by my desk let in a draft no matter how tightly I sealed it. I'd been home from the hospital for 48 hours. No calls, no knock on my door, no, "Hey, how are you?" from my mom or anyone else who claimed to be family. I plugged in my phone charger, sat on the bed, and opened my email. One new message. Not from anyone I cared about. Just the university's billing department reminding me my fall tuition balance was still unpaid. I closed the laptop without replying. Not because I didn't plan to pay, but because I had no idea how I would. To distract myself, I scrolled through the freelance boards I bookmarked. Ghostwriting gigs, editing jobs, virtual tutoring, anything that could keep me afloat. While tabs loaded, I reflexively opened Instagram again. Celine's face was the first thing I saw. She was seated on a rooftop, gold light catching her cheekbones just right. A glass of mimosa sparkled in her hand. Croissants, fruit, avocado toast laid out in front of her, like a magazine spread. Same cream Dior dress. Her caption? "No better way to start the day. Thanks, Mom, for always supporting the dream." I watched the reel loop twice before recording my screen, just in case it disappeared later. I let out a low, stunned laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so precise in its betrayal. Celine didn't just forget to mention me. She crafted a world where I didn't exist. And maybe worse than thinking she earned all this was knowing she thought I didn't. I stared at the screen, then pulled open my saved emails. 1 month ago, I'd reached out to Mom asking for help buying a second-hand anatomy textbook. Mine had been ruined by spilled coffee during an overnight cram session. I'd attached a screenshot of the listing, $42, used, highlighted already, but readable. She replied 2 days later. "That's a luxury, Astrid. You'll have to make do." A luxury. I leaned back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about that word. Luxury, for me, meant a used textbook I couldn't afford. Dream, for Celine, meant champagne brunches on rooftops. I didn't even know what kind of person you had to become to not see the difference. Later that afternoon, I logged into my student insurance portal to check if I could get follow-up coverage from the hospital. The login failed. I tried again. Same error. I called the school's admin office. After being transferred twice, a woman named Janine finally picked up. "Hi, yes, I'm trying to access my insurance information." "Let me pull you up," she said, typing loudly. Looks like your policy was canceled in July." Canceled? "Yeah, request came from a parent file. Something about financial consolidation." I didn't respond right away. My throat had gone dry. I asked her to email me the documentation. When the email came in, it was there in plain text. My mother had submitted the cancellation form. No replacement coverage. No warning. I didn't cry. Again, not out of strength, but because crying would have meant I was surprised. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. I titled the first column Request, the second Response. Then Celine's posts, bank statement dates, and excuse used. Row 1, textbook, that's a luxury. Brunch photo, $3,500 withdrawal. She's delicate. Row 2, insurance lapse, financial consolidation. Paris announcement post, $3,500 withdrawal. She's networking. I kept going. Every slight, every dismissal, every financial redirection that mirrored one of Selena's upgrades. At the bottom of the sheet, I wrote, "Mom's silence isn't absence, it's redirection." And that was the first time I understood. This wasn't a matter of miscommunication. This was a system, built quietly, operated efficiently, and I had been edited out of it. I wasn't angry, not yet. That came later when I realized who they chose to protect. A week passed in a fog of cheap coffee and unpaid bills. I kept my head down, went to class, did what needed doing. I moved through days like a machine that had forgotten how to rest. That Monday, I checked my inbox in the campus library. I was half expecting another late fee notice. Instead, the subject line read, FAFSA, Award Status Update. I clicked and blinked. Your scholarship application has been denied based on reported family income. I reread it. Then again. My throat tightened. I logged into my FAFSA portal. My heart pounded, not in surprise, but in resignation. The form showed $3,500 a month in parental support. Same figure from the bank statements. So that's what they reported. That I was fully funded, that I needed nothing. I printed the page and walked across campus to the financial aid office. Inside, the receptionist smiled like I was a returning customer. Name? Astrid Malcolm, she typed. One sec. Here we are. Denied due to parental contribution above threshold. Looks like everything checks out. Your file shows consistent monthly support. I nodded slowly. Can I get a copy of what was submitted? She frowned. Unfortunately, we can't release parent-submitted data without a formal request. Of course. I walked out holding back tears, not from shame, but from how precisely I'd been erased. Not ignored, rewritten. And in the space where need should have been listed, there was instead a lie with my name on it. Back in my dorm, I shut the door and stared at my laptop for a long time. Then I opened my notes app. I scrolled past my budget spreadsheet, past the email drafts I never sent, until I found a section labeled Conversations That Should Have Mattered. The last entry was dated September 14th. A Zoom call with my mother. It had started with me asking, gently, why didn't you help with the textbook? It was under $50. She looked up from whatever she was scrolling on and said, Celine asks. You never do. She cries when she needs something. You always seem... Fine. I remember biting the inside of my cheek. I remember wanting to scream that being quiet wasn't peace. It was practice, survival. I had trained myself not to need, because every time I did, I came up empty. But instead, I said nothing. I let her keep talking about Celine's needs, as though I were a houseplant that thrived on neglect. That call was the last time I gave her a chance to explain. Now, months later, I read the scholarship denial again. And it wasn't the money I grieved. It was the realization that need alone meant nothing. That help wasn't about fairness. It was about favor. When someone tells you you'll manage enough times, I whispered, you stop expecting rescue. I sat there, numb, typing that line into my journal. Then another. And when no one shows up, you build your own exits, even if you bleed while walking. I closed the laptop, walked to the sink, washed my face with cold water until I felt real again. The next morning, between lab and lecture, I stopped by my professor's office to drop off an assignment. Dr. Halden looked up, his brows knitting. Astrid, wait. I turned. Are you okay? He asked, with real concern. I've noticed a dip in your participation lately. Your last lab report was late. That's not like you. I forced a smile. Just a lot on my plate, but I'm managing. He didn't press, just nodded slowly. Let me know if there's anything I can do. I walked out, backpack heavy against my shoulders. And as I headed to class, one thought rang louder than the rest. If I told the truth about the loans, the fake numbers, the textbook I never got, would it still sound like weakness? Or would it finally sound like what it was? Proof that I was never fine. Thanksgiving Eve came wrapped in gray clouds and an airport coffee I couldn't afford, but bought anyway. I boarded the red-eye flight with a carry-on that weighed more in silence than in contents. Just a few textbooks, my laptop, and an envelope stuffed with bills I wasn't sure I could pay. No gifts, no holiday sweater, just responsibility. Landing in Chicago felt like stepping into a childhood I didn't recognize anymore. Oak Park hadn't changed, but I had. The drive from the airport was quiet. Mom didn't come to get me. It was Dad, barely awake but still polite. The ride was filled with safe questions. How's school? Staying warm out there? We didn't mention money, or Celine, or anything that actually mattered. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered once, like it wasn't sure if I deserved a welcome. Inside, the house was just as I remembered. Same smell of lemon wood cleaner, same framed photos on the wall, except all of them were slightly rearranged. In most, I was cropped out. In one, replaced altogether by a print of Celine in a graduation robe. Mom greeted me in the kitchen with a quick nod, no hug. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge," she said, turning back to whatever she was stirring. Celine was upstairs, already posting family time stories. I hadn't even taken off my shoes yet. That night, I slept in my old room. The same twin bed, same curtains I picked out when I was 10. But the walls felt thinner now, like they'd absorbed too much and weren't sure what belonged anymore. Dinner the next day was quiet at first. Jazz played low from the speaker Dad always kept on the counter. The turkey was overcooked. The mashed potatoes were fine. I sat across from Celine, who looked radiant in a beige silk blouse and gold earrings that caught the light every time she turned to smile at Dad. Midway through the meal, Dad looked up at me and asked casually, "So, is the $1,500 helping with expenses?" I dropped my fork. It clanged louder than it should have. "What money?" He blinked, fork halfway to his mouth. Mom paused mid-cut of turkey. Celine sipped her wine like she hadn't heard. "I'm sorry," Dad asked. "There haven't been any transfers," I said, keeping my voice even. "Not since I started med school, not $1. The room went still. Even the jazz seemed to pause. Dad's eyes shifted to Mom. She didn't look up, just reached for her napkin and dabbed her lips delicately. "I thought we were sending it every month," he said slowly, voice tinged with confusion. "I needed to reroute some of it," Mom replied. "To who?" he asked. "She needed it more," Mom said plainly. "Celine's program is competitive, expensive. Astrid always manages." There it was. That word again. I stared at her. "So managing means starving?" She finally looked up at me. "Don't be dramatic." Dad turned toward me, eyes scanning like he was finally reading a page he'd skimmed too many times. "You've really received nothing?" "Nothing," I repeated. "Not even when I was in the hospital last month." Celine shifted in her seat. "Wait, you were in the hospital?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A moment of sharp memory hit me, a text I'd received weeks ago. I had brushed it off at the time. It was from Mom. "Make sure she doesn't notice. Transfers under the name again." I thought she meant a utilities bill, or maybe a subscription. Now I realized the she was me. Dad leaned back in his chair, hands loose in his lap. "You told me you were handling the transfers." "I did," Mom said. "But not to her," he finished. Nobody said anything for a long time. Celine looked down at her plate, her smile gone. I pushed back my chair and stood. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I just need some air." I walked out through the front door and stood on the porch. The wind was colder than I remembered. But it was clean. Honest. It didn't pretend not to sting. Behind me, the house remained still. No one followed. I stayed on the porch long enough for the cold to settle into my bones, but not long enough to shiver. The wind cut across my cheek like it had a point to prove. Inside, I heard muffled movement, chairs scraping, a plate being picked up, but no footsteps in my direction. No one opened the door. No one asked if I was okay. When I finally walked back in, no one looked up. Mom was wiping the counter like it owed her something. Celine scrolled her phone with one hand, her wine glass in the other. Dad stood in the hallway, not saying much, just existing in the pause. That night, I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, the laptop warming my thighs. I downloaded the last 12 months of statements from the joint trust account Dad had set up for educational use. I highlighted every withdrawal that matched the same recurring amount, $3,500. The name beside each? Celine. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I copied the data into a clean Word doc and titled it with a single line. Where did it go? The next morning, brunch was laid out like nothing had happened. Quiche, fruit salad, sweet rolls. Celine hummed while plating strawberries. Dad poured himself black coffee. Mom filled her glass with orange juice, no champagne this time. I walked in, printouts in hand, and set a crisp white folder in the center of the table. You can read this now or later, I said. It has every deposit and every withdrawal. Dates, amounts, accounts, no commentary, just facts. Celine arched an eyebrow. What is this, a presentation? No, I replied. A fact sheet. Dad reached for the folder first, flipping the pages slowly, lips pressing into a thin line. Mom didn't move. Her nails tapped lightly against her glass. Celine finally leaned over, curiosity outweighing apathy. She froze halfway through page 3. Wait, this says my account. I met her gaze. It does? Monthly, since last year, while I was skipping meals and working double shifts, while I was in the hospital and you were posting brunch selfies. Dad looked up, jaw clenched. Is this accurate? No one answered. He looked at Mom. Leona. She took a slow sip of her juice, eyes steady. It was still used for education. Not hers, he said. I had to make a judgment call. Without telling me? He asked. She needed it more. She needed $42,000 more? Celine sank back into her chair, lips parted like she wanted to say something, but didn't know how. I didn't stay. I left the room, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside again. The sun was out, but it didn't warm me. I walked to the end of the block, past houses I used to recognize. I sat on a bench at the corner park, phone off, mind quiet. When I turned it on hours later, the screen lit up like a holiday sale. 83 missed calls, 24 texts, all from Mom. You misunderstood. We can talk. Don't escalate this. You're stronger. She's sensitive. That last one hit like a fist through silk. I stared at the message. I thought about every time she said I was strong, and how that word was used as a pass, for her, for everyone else, to do less. I typed one sentence in reply. That sentence is why you lost me. Then I deleted the entire thread. The house was still when I woke up, not in the comforting way childhood memories often are, but in that unnerving, hollowed-out silence that follows a wound no one wants to talk about. Downstairs, I heard the low hum of Dad's printer and the faint clatter of his keyboard. It was just past 11. Thanksgiving leftovers were untouched in the fridge. No one had bothered to reheat a thing. I tiptoed to the stairs and paused halfway down when I caught sight of him through the narrow crack in the home office door. He sat hunched forward, glasses low on his nose, scanning a screen like the truth might blur if he didn't squint hard enough. She said it was locked, he muttered. The trust fund portal was open on his monitor. I recognized the layout, same one I'd seen weeks ago when I downloaded my statements. He clicked through entries like flipping pages in a courtroom binder. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something heavier, betrayal with a coat of dust on it. When I came down an hour later, he didn't look up. He just nodded once, the kind of nod that said, "We'll talk, but not here." The next morning, everyone moved around the kitchen like it was a stage set. Too careful, too rehearsed. Brunch was being prepped. Quiche, cut fruit, artisan bread. Celine was already dressed like she was about to be photographed, makeup perfect, curls deliberate. Mom moved between sink and oven, pretending not to feel the shift in gravity. Dad sat at the table. "How did you get around the trustee lock?" he asked, eyes steady on Mom. She paused mid-pour of orange juice. "I filed for early disbursement, still for education." He didn't blink. "She's in fashion." She gave him a practiced look. "That's part of the modern economy, Byron. It's business now." He leaned forward. "Astrid's in medicine." I waited for someone, anyone, to say something useful, but it hung there, like fog inside the walls. Then Mom turned to me with that same tone she used when I was a kid asking for candy before dinner. You always figure things out. You always land on your feet. I swallowed that down without replying. Later that afternoon, while walking past the garage on my way to grab my charger from the car, I stopped. The light was on inside and the door slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw her. She was crouched beside a shipping box, sliding an envelope inside. On the box, in her neat handwriting, "From Dad." She sealed it, then stood quickly, unaware I'd seen. I didn't say a word. I just stepped back, out of sight, and turned on my phone camera long enough to snap a photo of the label. That evening, I waited until Dad had poured his usual decaf and was settling into the armchair. I sat across from him and showed him the image. He stared at the screen, then at me. "She didn't even ask me," he said after a beat, voice thin. I didn't nod, didn't answer. I let him sit with it. That night, the hallway light stayed on longer than usual. Around midnight, I heard the soft creak of the guest room door being opened, then closed. Dad didn't sleep in the master bedroom again. The next day, I received a text from Celine. "Why are you turning everyone against Mom?" I stared at it for a moment, then replied, "I didn't say anything. I just showed the numbers." The message was marked read. No response came. But the silence? That finally made sense. Monday morning hit like a reset button I didn't ask for. I boarded the early flight back to Philadelphia, with barely a word exchanged between me and my father. He offered to drive me to the airport, and I accepted, because I didn't want to give my mother the satisfaction of a goodbye. The silence in the car was thick, but not angry, just tired. He helped me lift my bag into the trunk, then said, "Be safe." I nodded. That was it. Back in my dorm, the radiator hissed like it remembered me. I dropped my coat over the chair and plugged in my phone, which had been off for the entire flight. As soon as it powered up, a notification popped. Missed call. Celine. Voicemail, one new. I hesitated, then hit play. "Hey, She exhaled into the mic like she was trying to conjure emotion. "I know things got weird, but I'm really struggling now. Studio rent's due, and Mom said she can't send more this month. You've always had a good heart." "Help?" The words help and heart clung to each other like a rehearsed line. There it was. A soft apology, wrapped around a withdrawal request. Even her tone was familiar. That gentle cadence she used when she wanted something but didn't want to say it directly. I didn't answer right away. I let the message sit for a few hours while I caught up on assignments and emails. Then, around noon, I texted her back. "I forgave a long time ago, but that doesn't mean I'm funding denial." No reply came. That night, while scrolling through Instagram stories during a late dinner of scrambled eggs and toast, I got a screenshot from an old friend from high school, Clara, someone who'd known us both since elementary. She sent the image with 3 words. "You seen this?" I opened it. Celine, sitting on a park bench, holding a cup of overpriced coffee, looking straight into the camera. Eyes slightly red, hair styled in loose curls. The caption, "Some sisters break you more than strangers ever could." Below it, in soft script font, "Even family betrays." Hashtags lined the bottom like a courtroom transcript. Sisterhood broken, circs support each other. Healing journey. Forgiveness. Takes time comments flooded in. You deserve better. So proud of your strength. Cut out the toxicity, queen. I didn't flinch. I didn't roll my eyes either. I just stared at it, longer than I meant to. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about strategy. Celine had pivoted, like any good PR person does. When the numbers stopped working in her favor, she changed the story. Framed herself as the wounded party. Painted me as a betrayer. I could have commented. I could have posted a screenshot of the bank records or the trust withdrawals. But that would have made me look like the very villain she needed me to be. So instead, I updated my timeline. The one only I could see. 12/5. Celine. Public sympathy campaign launched. Objective: isolate Astrid. Narrative: betrayal, emotional trauma. Tactic: indirect blame. Plus, passive image. Underneath it, I wrote, let her build it. The truth doesn't blink. Then I turned off my phone. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I didn't need the noise. By mid-December, the city had gone gray. Even the sky looked exhausted. Finals were around the corner, and campus buzzed with the kind of quiet that only comes from people holding their breath. I was walking back from the science building when I saw a text from Dad. I just want you to know, I'm meeting the attorney this week. I stopped on the sidewalk, wind biting at my neck. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then, I put the phone back in my coat pocket and kept walking. He hadn't asked for advice. He hadn't asked for permission. He just decided. Sometimes people change, not because you begged them to, but because the truth finally stared back hard enough. The next day, I got a message from my aunt, who lives 3 towns over and only texts when someone's either born or buried. I heard. Is it true? Your dad filed? So it was done. Later that week, while standing in line for coffee near campus, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a tag notification on social media. Someone had mentioned me in a story. It was a post from a local lifestyle blog I didn't follow. Headline: Creative Visionary honored for her resilience and family legacy. The image: Celine in a deep green jumpsuit, accepting a plaque from some grant foundation. Her smile stretched wide, the kind of wide that says, I planned this moment down to the last mascara blink. The article quoted her. Growing up in a home full of sacrifice and intellect shaped who I am. I'm endlessly grateful for my family's belief in my dream. But what made my stomach knot wasn't her name, it was my mother's. We made tough choices, the quote read, so she could focus on her path. We've always believed in her vision. Tough choices. The irony was surgical. I saved the article. Then I opened a new browser tab and searched the foundation's name. They had a contact form. I hesitated for a second, not out of fear, but because I wanted the words to land like truth, not revenge. I uploaded 3 documents: a PDF of trust fund withdrawals, every $3,500 transfer, screenshots of Celine's sponsored content, and her brunch lifestyle reels. A short note. It read, Sacrifice is not a hashtag. Some of us lived it. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. That night, I turned off all my notifications. Phone, email, even Slack. I didn't want applause. I wanted quiet. I pulled out my scholarship application, reopened the draft I had buried months ago. And this time, I wrote without editing myself to make others comfortable. I don't come from nothing, I typed. I come from being forgotten. I detailed the missed meals, the night shifts, the hospital stay, not as sob stories, but as facts. I wasn't applying to be rescued. I was documenting the excavation. I ended it with one line. Resilience isn't inherited. It's chosen. Then I hit submit. I closed my laptop and leaned back, not relieved, just steady. Some battles aren't about winning. Sometimes, it's just about choosing not to disappear. The last week of December arrived under the guise of normalcy. Quiet buildings, dusty windows, and the smell of burnt coffee in every academic hallway. Finals were done. Grades were pending. Most students had gone home. I stayed back a few days to close out lab work and catch up on hours I'd been forced to miss earlier in the semester. On Thursday morning, I was walking across the courtyard, gloves tucked into my coat sleeve, hands raw from handling beakers and bins, when Professor Lathrop passed me on the sidewalk. He smiled with recognition, then paused. Oh, you're Celine, right? The one with the creative grant? I stopped walking. It took me a second to realize he was serious. No, I said, trying to keep my voice flat. I'm the other daughter, the one who paid for it. He flushed, adjusted his scarf, and mumbled something about mixing up names. I nodded, kept walking. But the sting wasn't from him. It was from knowing exactly how it happened. She had overwritten the narrative with such precision that even people who had seen me in scrubs thought I was the sister in silk. Later that day, I saw another blog post. "My sister and I are close," Celine was quoted saying. "I owe her a lot." Underneath, a photo. I knew when it was taken, our last Thanksgiving before college. What I didn't know was that the original image had included me. The version they used had me cropped out, only Celine visible, her arm hovering where mine had once been. That kind of editing wasn't accidental, it was a choice. 2 days later, I flew home for Christmas. I didn't want to, but Dad had asked. "Just this one," he'd said. "It'll be different." I didn't ask how. I already knew better. The house looked festive, tree-lit, fireplace running, carols on a loop. Corliss didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her presence was loud even in silence. Christmas Eve dinner was roast and sides, nothing too extravagant. We sat at the table like actors in a play we hadn't rehearsed. Celine laughed louder than necessary. Dad kept refilling everyone's drinks like distraction was his job. After dinner, it was time for presents. Celine got new travel gear, a sleek Polaroid camera, and a stack of gift cards. Target, Sephora, Airbnb. She squealed, thanked everyone, even hugged Dad. I watched from the corner of the room. There was no box with my name, no stocking, no tag, not even a card. I didn't ask. No one explained. Corliss kept humming along to the music like nothing was missing. After they all went to bed, I walked upstairs, packed my bag, and zipped it shut with finality. The next morning, I caught Dad in the kitchen, halfway through a cup of coffee. "I'm heading back," I said, his brows lifted. "You don't have to—" "Class starts sooner than they think." He nodded, then reached into the drawer near the stove and handed me a small folded receipt. I opened it. It was from the bookstore, a new anatomy atlas, paid in full. "Not everything was forgotten," he said. I folded it back up and slipped it into my coat pocket. I didn't hug him. He didn't reach for one. As I walked out the door, no one called after me. I didn't slam it. I didn't look back. I left the house the way you leave a hotel after a bad stay, polite, detached, and sure you won't be coming back. Philadelphia greeted me with wet sidewalks and the familiar smell of city grime clinging to my coat. The dorm hallways were quiet, most students still home for the holidays. I dropped my bag, kicked off my boots, and opened the small window above the heater just wide enough to breathe. 2 days later, a letter arrived in my campus mailbox. No return address, just the logo of a loan servicing company. Reminder, payment on education loan IDGI, Malcolm 2387 is due January 15th. I froze. I hadn't taken out a loan. I knew every digit of my FAFSA record, and nothing like this existed. I sat down at my desk and called the number listed. After verifying my name, the woman on the line said cheerfully, "Yes, we have a balance of $8,900 on file for an education program, co-signed digitally by A.S. Malcolm." "What school?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling. She listed a private design institute in Los Angeles, fashion certificate program. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked, "And the billing address?" She read off my parents' house. My mother's name was listed as the alternate contact. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there, completely still. My name had been used, without my consent, again. And this time, for something that had absolutely nothing to do with me. I pulled up the PDF from my email inbox, printed it, and walked it straight to the campus legal services office. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I filled out the fraud report with the same calm you'd use to pack a box. It wasn't emotionless. It was efficient. The next afternoon, I stopped by the coffee shop on campus to decompress. As I waited for my drink, someone tapped my shoulder. "Astrid?" I turned. It was Mrs. Anitra, our old neighbor from Oak Park. She was visiting her granddaughter for a campus tour. "Oh my goodness," she said. "You look so grown. How's life abroad?" I blinked. "Abroad?" "Yes, your mom said you dropped out and went to Europe. Met someone." I stared at her, stunned. "I don't even have a passport." She laughed awkwardly. "Well, I must have misunderstood." "No," I said gently. "You didn't." Later that evening, I scanned and emailed all the documents, the loan fraud, the altered FAFSA data, the bank statements, directly to my father. I didn't attach a message, just the truth. He replied the next morning. "I've already started the reversal petition with the trust attorneys. This won't be fast, but it'll be done." I read it twice. Then finally, I exhaled. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself for the first time in weeks. A real meal. Garlic chicken, steamed broccoli, rice from a proper pot, not a microwave pouch. I set the table. I poured water into a glass, not a bottle. No phone beside me, no music. Just a warm bowl and a fork. I didn't need someone to watch me eat to make it count. I sat there, quiet, and for the first time, it felt like enough. January dragged its feet like an old man in snow boots, slow, deliberate, and uninterested in urgency. I found my rhythm again, not in celebration, but in consistency. I graded biology quizzes in the tutoring lab, packed lunch with intention, and stopped checking my phone for reactions. One afternoon, while highlighting errors on a lab worksheet, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen and froze. FaceTime, Mom. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then, against every instinct, I picked up. Her face filled the screen, haloed by soft golden lighting. Behind her, strings of white lights twinkled, music thumped faintly, and Celine laughed off camera. "We were just talking about you," Mom said, all teeth and practiced warmth. "Celine got invited to Paris Fashion Week. Can you believe it?" My silence was answer enough, but she plowed ahead. "She's networking like crazy," she added. "You should see the list of designers she's working with." "How's school?" she tacked on, like it was a formality. I tilted the phone slightly so she could catch a glimpse of the tutoring lab behind me. Fluorescent lights, whiteboards, stacks of student folders. "Still not luxury, apparently," I said. She blinked. Either she didn't catch the tone or chose not to. "That's good," she said, smiling. "You always make it work." I hit the red button before she could continue. Afterward, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't even sigh. I saved the screenshot of her mid-party grin, filed it into a private folder on my phone, and renamed it Last Call Answered. The caption I typed under it in my notes: "This is the last time I pick up out of politeness." That Saturday, Dad came to town for a business review. He didn't say he was coming until the morning of. Just texted, "In Philly, got groceries. Can I stop by?" I met him at the cafe 2 blocks from campus. He slid into the booth across from me like a man who finally understood silence. No apologies, just presence. He placed a second-hand anatomy atlas on the table between us. "Saw this at a thrift shop," he said. "Still has your tabs in it." I opened it, smiled faintly. "This is my copy, from freshman year." "I should have asked more questions," he said, eyes on the steam rising from his coffee. "I stopped needing the answers," I replied. We didn't hug goodbye. He just handed me a brown paper bag with frozen chicken, rice, 2 apples, and one oddly specific post-it that read, "Double-check your oil levels." That night, I sat by my desk with the window cracked slightly. Snow floated sideways outside. The radiator rattled, familiar and oddly comforting. I pulled out my journal, wrote slowly, deliberately. I used to think strength meant silence. Now I know it means choice. I walked over to the fridge, grabbed a sticky note, and pressed it onto the freezer door. On it, I wrote, "Survived, yes, but no longer starving." Then I turned off the light. The first green broke through the soil sometime in March, It wasn't dramatic, just the tiniest sprig poking out of the university greenhouse planter, defiant against weeks of frost. I stood there staring at it longer than made sense, my hands still dirty from repotting seedlings. I'd started volunteering twice a week, not for credits, not for pay, just because it was quiet, because nothing asked anything of me except to show up and water what was mine. My classes were manageable now. The scholarship had been reinstated after the review board accepted my amended paperwork and affidavit. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to cut back on bar shifts and sleep like a person again. On a Tuesday evening, just after I got back from the lab, my phone rang. Celine. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Her voice was fast, clipped at the edges. Mom's only sending me $1,000 a month now. That doesn't even cover rent. You have Dad's attention now. Do you think this is fair? I let the silence hang. She was waiting for sympathy. Instead, I said, I lived on 0. Remember that before you complain about less than you expected. She didn't respond. The line went quiet. Then the call ended. I stared at the phone for a second, not out of hurt, but because it felt like the final page in a chapter I didn't want to reread. No scream, no curse, just stillness. That night, I wrote in my journal, some people only learn empathy through absence. I didn't mean it as cruel, just accurate. The weekend came, and I bought myself a cake from the grocery store. One of those simple single-layer chocolate ones with too much icing and exactly the right amount of celebration. I brought it home, lit one small candle, and sat at my kitchen table. No one else was there. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and whispered, I'm proud of you. Not for surviving, but for choosing not to shrink. Monday morning, I checked my mail. Among the flyers and coupons was an envelope from the trust attorney's office. Inside, confirmation of asset reallocation, legal language, bullet points, clauses. My name spelled correctly for once. At the bottom, a handwritten line added by someone in the office. This amount is yours, not because you asked louder, but because someone finally listened. I folded the paper and set it beside my coffee. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. Lecture notes, emails, grant proposals, not to prove anything, just because I could. Later that afternoon, as I walked past a group of undergrads laughing outside the library, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass. Straight back, steady steps. That's the thing about survival. One day, it turns into living, and by the time they notice, you're already free.